What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today we're going to go through the different components for an EV conversion. Kind of walk you through my plan and where I'm going to place different components. So stick around, check it out. Okay, so here's the official diagram, wiring diagram from EV West for Netgain Hyper9. The first time I looked at this, I was like, what the hell? This is impossible. This is crazy. It looks super complicated, but it actually isn't that bad when you think about, when you break it down to the different components. So you'll see down here on the bottom right is the controller for the motor. And this is the motor down here. There's a different controller, and there's going to be a bunch of leads coming out for the different types of controls. But the main thing is the traction pack, which is your main battery, is going to have the input to the controller, and then you're going to have another 3 leads going from the motor to the controller. So I'll kind of go through that as well. But this is the official wiring diagram, and we're going to have to follow this, but let me just break it down to the different components, and it makes a lot more sense. So there's these different systems. There's the batteries and charging system. So you have to think about your battery pack, also known as the traction pack. You're going to need a DC to DC converter. Since there's no alternator in this car, you're going to be charging your 12-volt battery using a converter off of the traction pack. And you may ask, well, why do you need a 12-volt battery? Well, that's just to run a lot of the internal normal operations of the car, such as your windshield wipers, your lights, your signal lights, things like that, radio. So that's still necessary to have a 12-volt battery. And then you're going to need a charging system. So the charger, you're going to need a J1772 charge inlet port. So then you can, get charged wherever and most places. The AVC2 helps the charger. It's kind of like the brains for that. Then you have the motor and throttle system. So the actual Hyper9. You have your throttle pedal. So you can't use the original pedal. That was mechanical. So you need a throttle pedal, which kind of translates the motion of your foot to how much torque in the motor. The motor controller, of course, which controls that. So the motor controller and inverter, so it converts your DC current to AC for the motor. You also need a cooling system for the controller because it gets really hot running that. So we'll talk about that maybe. System displays, so near the dashboard you want a state of charge and additional system displays such as BMS and things like that to see how the system's running. Then you have your whole safety system. So these are the fuses, contactors, relays. All this is going to be mostly in a big contactor box. So you have your shunt, your 12-volt contactor, 48-volt contactor, fuses, relay. Additionally, you have your main switch, which you can turn on and off to shut off your battery pack. Key ignition to start the whole process. And then you have a couple of fuses as well. So the next thing is, where do you put all this in the car? So in my situation, for this car, the motor is in the rear, so that's already been mounted, as you can see in previous videos. I'm going to be also installing the motor controller back there, and a cooling system for that, which is basically a chill plate with a pump, a radiator, little reservoir to help that cool off. Then in the driving area, obviously you have your throttle pedal, and you're going to have your system displays. So the next thing is there's no more room in the back for the batteries. So I'm going to place the batteries in the front. And in this case, I've chosen to use 5 Tesla Model S modules. That'll bring it up to 125 volts, which is what the motor runs off of. I'll put the main switch and the fuses up here as well. I'm going to use the existing. There's no gas tank in the front anymore, so that's why there's room in the front. I'm also going to put the charger and the charge inlet in the front because I want to have the charge port where the original gas inlet port was. Okay, and then so then there's a couple other components. So where do we put the converter? Where do we put the 12-volt battery? Where do we put the junction box? I've seen some conversions of this car where they put all that in the rear. And yes, that's possible. One of the things you have to consider is the weight distribution. So a stock 66 Porsche 912, the weight distribution was a little bit more to the back. However, reading the forums, everyone recommended better performance when there was more weight in the front. So estimate, gas tank itself is 56 pounds. A full tank of gas is about 98. Spare tires 40, so you got 194 pounds in the front. And then the engine and exhaust I removed, that was about 225 pounds. And then in terms of the new components, I've added on the back. So far, the Hyper9, 120 pounds, controllers can be about 10, flywheels 15, adapter plate 25, the cross member out of tube steel is about 40 pounds. The motor bracket is about 5. I think actually that's actually a little bit more. I upgraded to a thicker steel, so maybe that's a little bit more, maybe more like 10 pounds. Cooling system's going to be about 15. So we're looking at about maybe 240 pounds in the back. In the front, estimated the battery modules about 225 pounds for 5 battery modules. The actual battery box enclosure, which I'm working on, I didn't make it super thick. I just used 16 gauge metal, sheet metal. So it's around 20 pounds or so. It's pretty light, but it is structurally safe. And then the charger is about 15 pounds. So we're looking at 240 pounds. And then I still have these 3 things to worry about: DC converter, 12-volt battery, high voltage junction, contactor box, which could be anywhere from 30 to 45 more pounds. So where should that be placed? I'm thinking I have a lot of room in the front, and I'm thinking just making it easier, because here's the situation. You need to run high voltage cables all the way to the rear. So one of the considerations is if the charger is in the rear, then you might have to run an additional line from the battery to the charger. So I'm going to be running the high voltage cables through the center tube where the transmission, the cables are, and the shift linkage and all that. And it's pretty tight in there. So I don't want to have to jam a 3rd cable or a 4th cable. So I want to keep that to a minimum. So just, if I can run 2 cables, positive, negative, down the center, and then have all this stuff in the front, then I think that's going to be ideal. And what I will do is, instead of a standard lead acid battery, I'm going to look at some maybe lithium ion, or super light. And so that'll be a lot easier. And a DC converter, like a smaller one, that might be easier. So we could save some weight there. I am thinking about doing the cooling for the Model S batteries. So there's going to be additional weight for the radiator and the pump. But I think that, and the reason why is I don't want to have to, I have a cooling back here already, but I don't want to have to run cooling lines through the car as well. So I'm going to have a separate cooling in the front. So that's kind of the way I'm thinking right now. And so, when you're planning out your conversion, you got to figure out where you want to place things. Obviously do the parts that are going to have to be done, which is like I put the motor, I put that installed. Now the next step is, okay, I know the battery's going to be in the front, so now I'm building the battery box. And so I'll have some videos on that soon. I'm also working on how to mount the controller in the back. And then we're going to start building all this other stuff like the contactor box, the charger, all that stuff, the 12-volt system, the cooling for this. So that's coming soon. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Stay tuned for another video. I got some stuff about batteries. I think I'm about 2/3 of the way now on the battery. So it's pretty exciting. And I'd love to show you how that looks. All right. See you on the next video.